Good evening. Welcome to Fineprint. I'm Molly Gambhir. For weeks now, the impeachment proceedings have dominated headlines, not just in the United States, but across the world. And today is a crucial day in that process. The U.S. House of Representatives is currently voting. Last week, the House Judiciary Committee, remember, had approved 2 articles of impeachment, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. A 658-page report was also released by the House describing the 2 articles of impeachment. U.S. President Donald Trump once again today took to Twitter to slam the Democrats. He says this should never happen to another president again and maintains he did nothing wrong. Donald Trump has written an extraordinary letter to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, charging her with declaring an open war on American democracy. And in the letter, which stretches into more than 5 pages, the president says, quote, "History will judge you harshly," unquote. Nancy Pelosi described Donald Trump's letter as really sick. The Democrats, who enjoy a majority in the House of Representatives, are expected to win the impeachment vote, which requires a simple majority. That vote is currently underway and will carry on for the next few hours. On the left side of your screens are the latest numbers that have been trickling in. Republicans hold 53 of the 100 seats in the Senate, where they appear likely to prevail in any trial against Donald Trump, which would require a 2/3 majority of those present to remove him from office. So if the House approves articles of impeachment, what happens next? If the House resolution does stand approved, as is expected, it is then taken to the Senate. Since it would be a privileged resolution, the Senate must set aside all other legislative agenda and take it up. Articles of impeachment can be compared to an indictment. All 100 senators will act as jurors. Nancy Pelosi will be appointing impeachment managers from among the House Democrats to play the role of prosecutors. And the White House will decide its own defense team. Should Donald Trump be impeached, 67 votes in the Senate will be required to convict and remove the American president. The Democrats would need 20 GOP senators to break with the president and favor impeachment, which again is a minuscule chance. That's where the numbers stand. Americans also remaining divided as the House vote approached. Fox News released a poll that shows that 50% of the voters want to impeach and remove Donald Trump from office, while 46% oppose it. And according to a new CNN poll, support for impeaching Donald Trump and removing him from office stands at 45%.
To a question of the privilege of the House and send to the desk a privileged resolution.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Whereas Chairman Schiff and Chairman Nadler willfully and intentionally violated the rules of the House of Representatives.
The impeachment process has deepened political divides in the United States as the country heads for the 2020 presidential election.
Of the ranking minority member in violation of Rule 9 of the rules of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Chairman Schiff, in coordination with the Committees on Oversight and Reform and Foreign Affairs, announced a wide-ranging investigation into the...
As we continue to take a listen into what the U.S. House of Representatives are saying, let's also get in Stephen Golub, International Affairs expert, who's joining us on the broadcast. Hi, Stephen. Thanks very much for speaking with us. A pleasure as always. What do you think is expected to happen over the next few hours, and what's the likelihood that Donald Trump will be impeached, according to you?
It's practically certain that he'll be impeached, and then equally certain that he will not be convicted in the Senate trial, because the Democrats control the House of Representatives, which does the impeachment, and the Republicans control the Senate, which conducts the trial.
And Americans are deeply divided over whether the president must be impeached. And in the midst of those proceedings, he has been registering high approval ratings. What's your reading of those numbers?
Well, I'm not sure I'd characterize them as high approval ratings for an incumbent president, especially one whose economy is doing fairly well. His approval ratings are low. They've never really approached 50%. Right now, they've gotten a slight bump of going up a couple of percentage points in the 2 or 3 polls. but he still is below 50% approval rating, and there's a good prospect that that will stay the same all through the 2020 election campaign. Having said that, because of the peculiarities of the U.S. electoral system, there's a fair chance that he, even with approval ratings that range from 40 to 42 to 44%, and even if he loses the popular vote in the U.S., that is the overall vote, by up to 5 million votes compared to the Democratic candidate, he could still end up, because of the peculiarities of what's called our electoral college, our state-by-state voting system, being reelected.
So do we expect U.S. President to bow down to what the decision will be and actually step down?
Oh, no, he won't step down. If he's... This may not have been your question. It'll be an interesting situation if he does lose the Electoral College. That is, if he does lose the presidential election in November of next year, because he's made noises all along throughout his presidency that he might have been cheated back in 2016 and he could be cheated this time around, which are very bogus claims. Whether he'll step down if he even loses the election is something that we can hope for but not be certain about. But I think he will not step down from office simply by virtue of being impeached, no matter what the evidence is against him, no matter what the politics of the situation or the actual facts of the situation are.
And what's your sense also of the reactions that have been coming in from the American president? Of course, he's been tweeting about the proceedings as and when updates have been coming in. He's called it a coup. He's called it an issue that he takes zero responsibility over.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the very sad aspects of the times we live in is that the abnormal has become normal with Donald Trump. If any other president were to use such hyperbolic language and hateful language in describing opponents, the press, minorities, and the like, including in this most recent letter you mentioned that sought to defend himself against impeachment, the public and even members of his own party would be up in arms. But the abnormal has become normal. This was an extraordinary letter, both simply in terms of grammar and syntax, things you wouldn't expect from a secondary school student. But nonetheless, it's something we should, on the one hand, see as extraordinary, but on the other hand, we become somewhat accustomed to, because this is Donald Trump's operating style. If I may just mention one other thing that I think would be worthwhile for your viewers to be aware of, there is another big development above and beyond impeachment that will take place next year, and that is a Supreme Court decision on whether his financial records will be released to the public. According to some very clear body of law, they should be, but he's contesting that. By June or possibly earlier next year, the Supreme Court will decide whether whether those records must be released. They're held by his accountants, by a financial institution, and if that's the case, that could be explosive news in and of itself for what it may say about links to the Russians in terms of money laundering or debts owed to them or other financial irregularities that could be very damning to his election campaign, even if he isn't convicted. And, of course, as I said, his conviction by the Senate doesn't seem very likely at all.
All right. Thanks very much, Stephen, for all of those perspectives. We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on the latest coming in from the U.S. House of Representatives. A crucial few hours up ahead. And as Stephen is telling us, we will obviously, of course, also watch out for the next stage, which will be the Senate. Thanks very much for that, Stephen.